The best prepared family in Venezuela's collapse was robbed 3 times in 6 weeks. They had food, water, medical supplies, everything survival guides recommend. Their mistake wasn't what they stockpiled, it was telling neighbors about it. During Argentina's economic crisis, prepared families became targets within days because desperate people remember who has resources when their children are hungry. And in every collapse throughout history, the pattern repeats. The people who stockpile the most die first if they make these 8 mistakes. Here are the 8 mistakes that turn preppers into victims during economic collapse. Because having supplies doesn't guarantee survival. It guarantees you become a target unless you understand the psychology of desperation. If you want to survive the coming collapse without becoming the first house robbed when panic sets in, hit subscribe now. I break down the psychological mistakes that get prepared families killed, the human nature dynamics they don't teach in survival courses. Mistake number 8. Advertising your preparations to neighbors. The social error that makes you the first robbery target. The mistake is obvious, but almost everyone makes it. You've been preparing for months or years. You're proud of your food storage, your generator, your tools. Someone mentions supply chain problems and you casually say, "You're ready." You show a friend your setup, you mention your garden yields. Every conversation reveals a little more. And every person who knows becomes a liability when crisis hits. Here's why it's fatal. During Venezuela's collapse, prepared families who mentioned their stockpiles to neighbors became robbery targets within weeks of the crisis accelerating. Desperate people remember conversations. They remember who said they had extra food. They remember who had generators when power failed. And when their families are starving, they don't feel guilty about taking from people who have plenty. The psychology is simple. Right now, your neighbor thinks prepping is interesting, maybe eccentric. When their children are crying from hunger and they remember you mentioned having 6 months of food, you're not their eccentric neighbor anymore. You're the person who could save their family but chooses not to. That resentment becomes justification for violence. During the siege of Sarajevo, families who openly displayed resources in the early days became targets when the siege intensified. Neighbors who knew who had what organized to take it. These weren't criminals. They were regular people driven by desperation to rob people they'd lived next to for years. Here's your guard. Keep preparations invisible. When neighbors complain about empty stores, you complain too. When they mention being worried, you act worried too. Appear to be struggling at the same level as everyone around you. If someone asks if you're prepared, downplay everything. Never reveal the full extent of what you have. The person who appears barely ready survives longer than the person everyone knows is fully stocked. Mistake number 7. Trusting people too quickly because you believe crisis creates community. The optimism that gets you betrayed. The mistake is assuming collapse brings people together. You read stories about communities helping during disasters. So when crisis hits, you openly discuss plans, share supplies to build goodwill, and trust people because everyone's suffering together. Here's why it's fatal. Desperation destroys social bonds faster than possible. During Weimar hyperinflation, neighbors turned in neighbors for food rewards. People who had been friends for decades betrayed each other when families were starving. The psychology is brutal. Every person you trust is calculating their own survival. When their child is sick and you have medicine, they're deciding whether to ask or take by force. Family wins every time. During Argentina's collapse, mutual aid groups that formed early dissolved into infighting and theft within months. The people who trusted most got betrayed most because they revealed what they had. Here's your guard. Trust slowly. Verify everything. Assume self-interest until people prove otherwise through repeated behavior, not words. Build relationships carefully over time, but never assume crisis creates instant community. Most people will choose their family over you. Plan accordingly. Mistake number 6. Hoarding everything instead of strategically sharing to build alliances. The isolation that gets you overwhelmed. The mistake is thinking you can survive alone by keeping everything for yourself. You've got supplies, you've got skills, you don't need anyone, so you hoard everything, refuse to help neighbors, and plan to defend your resources by yourself or with just your immediate family. Here's why it's fatal. Isolated hoarders get overwhelmed by groups. You can't defend against 3 or 4 desperate people who coordinate. You can't stay awake 24 hours guarding your property. You can't watch all approaches simultaneously. Solo defenders get picked off by groups who didn't prepare but are willing to take what you have. During the Bosnian War, families who isolated themselves and refused to share became targets for organized groups. The families who survived created mutual defense networks where everyone contributed and everyone protected the group. Isolated families got overrun because numbers win. The psychology is strategic. You need allies, but you need them dependent on you for the right reasons. If you share everything freely, you become a resource to drain. If you share nothing, you become a target to rob. The solution is strategic sharing, where you provide value that makes you worth protecting. Here's your guard. Share approximately 10% of your resources to build loyalty with key neighbors. Not everyone, not randomly, but specific people who have complementary skills or strategic value. A neighbor with medical knowledge, someone with weapons training, people who add defensive capability. You give them enough that they're invested in your survival because you're valuable to them. They protect you because losing you means losing access to resources they need. You're not being generous. You're creating dependency where others have incentive to keep you alive and productive. That's the difference between sharing that strengthens you and sharing that weakens you. Mistake number 5, acting too early or too late on your exit strategy. The timing error that either wastes resources or gets you trapped. The mistake is either leaving the city when things are still functional and wasting the money on a premature move, or staying too long trying to preserve your normal life until escape becomes impossible. Here's why it's fatal. Move too early and you've spent thousands relocating for a crisis that might stabilize. You've left your job, pulled kids from school, burned through savings on a false alarm. Move too late and you're trapped in urban chaos with no way out. Roads blocked, fuel unavailable, violence increasing. The window for safe exit closes faster than you expect. The historical lesson is clear. Jews who left Germany in 1934 lost money and social position but lived. They walked away from careers, property, everything. It seemed like overreaction. Most of their friends who stayed thought they panicked unnecessarily. Those who waited until 1938, when persecution was obvious, lost everything, and many lost their lives. The ones who moved early looked foolish until they looked smart. During the Rwandan genocide, families who left at the first signs of ethnic tension survived. Those who waited, because surely it won't get that bad, got caught in the killing. The pattern repeats across every major collapse. Early movers waste money, but live. Late movers save money, but die. Here's your guard. Use the 5 warning signs we discussed in the previous video. When you see 3 of those 5 materializing in your area, you're in the exit window, not before, not after. 3 signs means the crisis is real, but escape is still possible. That's your signal. Ignore it, and you waited too late. Act before it, and you might be jumping at shadows. The brutal truth is that timing exit strategy is harder than any other survival decision. You're choosing between wasting resources on a false alarm and getting trapped in a real collapse. There's no perfect answer, but watching concrete indicators beats guessing. Mistake number 4, not understanding barter psychology and revealing your resources during trades. The exchange that turns you into a robbery target. The mistake is approaching barter like it's normal commerce. You want to trade for something, so you show what you have, negotiate a fair exchange, complete the trade, and everyone's happy. That's how markets work in stable economies. During collapse, that approach gets you robbed or killed. Here's why it's fatal. When you show valuable items during trades, desperate people aren't thinking about future exchanges. They're thinking about taking everything you have right now. You trade medicine for food today, Tomorrow, they come back with weapons to take all your medicine because they know you have it. During Argentina's collapse, people who displayed valuable items in barter exchanges became robbery targets within days. The person they traded with told others. Those others organized to rob them. The trade itself was the intelligence gathering operation that identified who had resources worth taking. The psychology is predatory. In stable times, merchants protect customers because repeat business matters. During collapse, there is no repeat business. There's only today's survival. The person who knows you have valuable supplies is deciding whether trading with you or robbing you provides better return. When they're desperate enough, robbery wins because it gets them everything. Not just what you're willing to trade. Here's your guard. Only show worthless items during trades. Hide your valuable supplies. When you need to trade food, you bring the worst food you have packaged to look like that's your only option. You act like you're barely surviving. You make them think trading with you is charity, not profit. The moment they believe you have significant resources, you become a target. The counterintuitive strategy is appearing poorer than you are. Rich traders during collapse get robbed. Poor traders get ignored. You want to be ignored while quietly acquiring what you need through trades that make you look desperate, not prepared. Mistake number 3, becoming the neighborhood solution guy too quickly by revealing all your skills and tools. The helper who becomes the scapegoat. The mistake is jumping to help everyone immediately when crisis hits. Your neighbor's generator breaks and you fix it. Someone needs medical help and you provide it. People have problems and you solve them because you prepared and have skills. You become the person everyone depends on. Here's why it's fatal. You become the person everyone blames when you can't fix their problems. When you successfully help someone, they're grateful. When you can't help someone, they're resentful. And eventually you'll face a problem you can't solve. A medical emergency you can't treat, a shortage you can't fill, a crisis you can't fix. The psychology turns dark. When their child is dying and you can't save them, grieving parents don't think rationally. They think you could have helped but chose not to. They think you're withholding supplies or knowledge. They think you saved others but not them, which means you decided their child wasn't worth saving. That grief becomes rage. That rage becomes violence. During desperate times, the community helper becomes the community target when they can't deliver miracles. You set expectations by solving early problems. When you can't solve later problems, people feel betrayed. They believed you could fix anything because you fixed everything before. When you fail, they attack. Here's your guard. Help selectively. Never reveal your full capabilities. Stay under the radar. When you help, make it seem like you barely managed to solve the problem, not like you have unlimited capacity. If you fix someone's generator, act like you got lucky, not like you're an expert mechanic who can fix anything. The strategic approach is calculated assistance. You help specific people who provide strategic value. You don't help everyone. You don't become the neighborhood savior. You stay invisible until you've carefully chosen who to reveal capabilities to and who to keep in the dark. Mistake number 2, storing everything in one location instead of caching supplies in multiple sites. The single point of failure that wipes you out. The mistake is keeping all preparations in your house or property. It's convenient. Everything's accessible. And when someone robs you, fire destroys your property, or authorities seize resources, you lose everything at once. One event eliminates your entire preparation. During Hurricane Katrina, government forces confiscated firearms door to door. People who had all their weapons at home lost everything. Those who had cached weapons in secondary locations maintained defensive capability. The psychology is redundancy. Military forces cache supplies in multiple locations, so losing one doesn't compromise the mission. Preppers who don't follow this lose everything to events they can't control. Here's your guard. Cache supplies in 3 to 4 locations, not close together, not places people connect to you. Rural property, buried supplies, storage units under different names. Tell no one about backup sites. When they take your obvious preps, you still have hidden reserves. When fire destroys your property, caches elsewhere survive. Strategic caching means accepting you might lose access to some caches, but ensuring you'll never lose all of them. Mistake number 1, believing your preparations make you safe. The confidence that gets you killed by groups who didn't prepare. The mistake is thinking that because you have food, tools, weapons, and supplies, you're going to survive. You've done everything survival guides recommend. You've stockpiled weird items. You've learned skills. You've prepared your property. You believe preparation equals safety? Here's why it's fatal. Preparation without community defense gets you killed by groups who didn't prepare but are willing to take what you have. 5 desperate, unprepared people with weapons beat 1 prepared person every single time. Numbers win, coordination wins, violence of action wins. Your stockpile doesn't protect you, it makes you a target. The brutal reality is that collapse is about power dynamics, not preparation levels. The best prepared family in any neighborhood becomes the primary target once resources become scarce. Groups form specifically to take from prepared individuals. They don't need to prepare if they can take from people who did. During the Bosnian War, well-prepared families who isolated themselves got overrun by organized groups who had nothing but numbers and willingness to use violence. The prepared families thought their supplies would save them. The groups thought those supplies were worth killing for. The groups won because violence beats preparation when you're outnumbered. The psychology is predatory mathematics. One person can't defend against coordinated attack from multiple directions. You can't stay alert 24 hours daily for months. You can't cover all vulnerabilities. You can't win against determined assault when you're outnumbered. Your preparations become the reason you're targeted, not the reason you survive. Here's your guard. Preparation is only the foundation. Survival requires strategic alliances, social intelligence, deception, and defensive capability you can't provide alone. You need trusted allies who add defensive depth. You need to appear unprepared to avoid targeting. You need positioning that makes attacking you not worth the cost. The hard truth is that stuff doesn't save you. Community intelligence saves you. Strategic positioning saves you. Understanding human psychology saves you. Preparation gives you resources to work with, but the people who survive aren't the ones with the most supplies. They're the ones who understand that collapse is psychological warfare, where appearing weak while being strong is the winning strategy. Why these mistakes kill prepared people? Every survival guide focuses on acquiring stuff: food, water, tools, weapons. But survival is different. Survival is reading social dynamics, managing information, and understanding that appearing unprepared often beats appearing ready. The pattern across every collapse is consistent. Highly visible preppers become early targets. They advertise capabilities, trust too freely, hoard instead of building alliances, miss exit timing, reveal resources, become neighborhood fixers, store everything in one place, and believe stuff equals safety. Here's what actually matters: psychology over stockpiles, alliances over isolation, strategic sharing over hoarding, deception over honesty, appearing weak over appearing strong. These contradict everything preppers are taught, but they're what actually works. The survivors from historical collapses weren't the best stocked. They were the most socially intelligent. They understood human behavior under stress. They built relationships carefully. They appeared ordinary while maintaining hidden capabilities. You need both. Material preparation gives you options. Social intelligence keeps you alive long enough to use those options. People who master both survive. People who only master preparation become supply depots for people who master violence. The window to fix these mistakes is before crisis forces the issue. Right now, you can adjust how you present yourself to neighbors. You can start caching supplies in secondary locations. You can build strategic relationships with key people. You can practice deception about your preparation levels. You can learn barter psychology. You can plan exit timing based on concrete indicators. Once crisis hits and you've already made these mistakes, correction becomes nearly impossible. Neighbors already know what you have. You've already trusted the wrong people. You've already isolated yourself. You've already revealed your capabilities. The damage is done, and reversal requires time you don't have. The preppers who survive aren't the ones with the most supplies. They're the ones who understand that collapse reveals human nature in its rawest form. Desperation makes people betray, steal, and kill. Self-interest overrides morality. Family survival justifies any action against outsiders. That's not cynicism. That's pattern recognition from every major collapse in history. Your preparations are necessary but not sufficient. You also need to understand the psychology of desperation, build strategic alliances, maintain operational security, use deception to appear weaker than you are, and position yourself so that attacking you costs more than ignoring you. Subscribe, because next week I'm revealing the specific defensive strategies that let prepared families survive in collapse scenarios where most prepared families became victims, the psychological tactics, the alliance structures, and the deception methods that turn preparation into actual survival instead of just making you a better stocked target. See you then.